Zoom icon. And click on our picture. Yep, there you go. Okay,
Are we all set?
yeah, yes.
Thank you very much. Welcome everybody to the, what's today? September 2nd meeting of the Tompkins Intergovernmental Relations Committee. Good to have everybody here. Looks like we have almost the whole committee. In any case, we have a quorum. Thanks everybody for joining us. Okay, looks like Amanda Spellacy is calling in now. So Kathy, do you see her?
Not yet.
All right.
We're watching.
Okay. All right. Well, let me just say first off, welcome, Michelle. It's good to have you there in the office and we can see you, and we're glad you're feeling better and we're delighted that you're with us. And I want to say the lovely sentiment that Deborah just sent out on email earlier today, thanking Kathy, Michelle, and Katrina for all the juggling that you do on our behalf, for managing so many meetings in a row and last minute resolutions and all of that. We are really, really lucky to have all of you. So thank you so much. And thank you to the ITS people. I don't know if they're listening anymore, but you know, they've really kind of propped up county government in a big, big way the last 6 months.
Yeah.
So we're grateful. Do you see any Spellacy phone number yet?
No, not yet.
Okay. All right. Well, she'll get here. Let me write her again. All right. And let me just jump ahead then while and I see Zoe Nelson from Cornell. Hi, Zoe. Pick up my chair's report, which is going to be a lot shorter than it had been because we already passed the resolution last night about the Climate Act and county participation in that. And Kathy and Katrina already sent me the certified resolution, which I sent on to NISAC, which I know they will get soon anyway. So we are, and I already heard from Sullivan County that they are going to pass a similar resolution next week. So that's good. That's how to get that started.
Okay, so you're gonna have to do allow to talk. Mute us.
So that was one piece of my report, and in your packet you do have Steve Aquario's letter and the membership of the Land Use and Local Government Committee. As I think I said last night, it's only got 10 members on that panel, whereas the other panels are between 13 and 17 members. So there's really no excuse that there's no county person on there. So, all right, is that Amanda Spellacy's phone number there, I see? She's muted. Kathy, can you unmute, or do I do that? I'll just hit ask to unmute. Just in case anybody is not sure. Amanda Spellacy is the district representative for Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer. And we've been very, very lucky to have Amanda on the phone most of our meetings. So Kathy, you can see her number, right? 760-5589. Can you hear us?
Showing Martha.
There, Martha, okay. I think she has to unmute herself using her phone. I can't unmute her.
Okay. I can't type in a hurry. All right.
Yeah, well, let us do it now.
All right. We're always, as I said, lucky to have her, and I understand that federal employees are not allowed to use Zoom for whatever reason. So Amanda always calls in. We will. To the agenda is that Micah Plinkalaire is going to be joining us around 12 o'clock, 12:15 to talk about the census, and he also is going to have to be calling in, isn't able to actually use Zoom. Okay, she says I can hang up and dial back. So let's try that.
Okay.
Just because our side is really good on technology doesn't mean that the technology always works. So thanks everybody for your patience.
Can I ask a question while we're waiting?
Yeah, absolutely.
About this push to have county representation on this council, would we be looking specifically for legislators or planners or either?
Anybody. Hold on one second. I am not muted on my end. I don't see her number anymore.
No,
No, she's not there.
I don't see her.
Oh, geez, and crow.
See, she was like, we're waiting.
Maybe
Basically, what?
maybe you can put her on speaker on your phone and she can speak through you.
That's a thought. Let's see.
Sounds like a fair.
Let's see if we can get her in now.
You see her now?
There she is again.
There.
All right. We see you. Can you hear me, Amanda? I redialed back in. All right. Can you unmute yourself, Amanda? It sounds like if she can hear us. Wow, sorry about this, everybody.
Click the ask to unmute.
I did.
All right, I see. I can only ask to unmute her, right?
Yeah, that's all, the only option we have.
All right.
I think
I'm
she's
gonna
doing.
call me. All right, we're trying to speak her. As I started to say, I actually wrote to Steve Aquario today. I said maybe, because one of the comments from Basil Sagos, the DEC commissioner, about putting a county representative on that panel was that he didn't want to go down the slippery slope of having elected officials be on the panel. I'm not sure what slippery slope was. I don't know if that meant if you put a Democrat on, you have to also have a Republican or vice versa. But I wrote to Steve Aquario today and said, look, maybe they just don't want an elected official for whatever reason. Here she is. Okay. Hi, Amanda. We're going to try this on speaker, see if this works. Okay. Want to say something? We'll see if everybody can hear you.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. All right. I'm here seeing nods. Yay. All right. Amanda, welcome. We are delighted to have you any and all time that you can give an update on what's going on in Washington. So go for it. You know, our usual question is about money.
Well, there's not we're in the middle of a recess, so there's not a ton to report, and I will say recess is not by our design or our preference. This is the last week. The Senate will be back in starting Tuesday, so Monday evening they'll be gaveled back in. The House comes back a week afterwards, and we've got some very real challenges, as you all know. We obviously have the pandemic matters to deal with. We have the financial and economic implications of that pandemic, and we still have many health issues that have to be addressed. So there's that. We have a federal government that runs out of money September 30th, which needs to be addressed. And so I guess we will see how things unfold. I think in terms of just the overall budget plan, it's very likely we will be doing a continuing resolution, which will at least take us probably through the election, if we've seen that in previous presidential election years. And that will just take current spending levels prorated for the length of time that the continuing resolution is for, and maintain whatever those funding levels are until an FY 2021 budget can be agreed upon.
Amanda, hold on 1 second.
One of the most pressing.
Can everybody hear Amanda? Is this okay? All right, wonderful. Go ahead.
So that's obviously, very pressing because we have minimal weeks till we run out of a budget, and what we have to hope is that the president also doesn't want to add a shutdown. the other challenges that we are facing. Beyond that, the olive branch was extended for negotiations. I don't really have any updates on what the White House or Mitch McConnell is intending to do except nothing. But we are willing and able and hopeful that we can return to conversations about how to take care of these very real needs at hand, including making sure that our state and local governments receive direct aid and remain solvent.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you very much.
Questions? I know it's not a lot, and it's regretful that it is what it is. And I should also mention that we also have the task at hand of worrying about the postal service, emphasis on service, which we also hopefully will see some traction on, but who knows?
Absolutely. I've got some hands up from the committee members, so I'll go to Deborah, then Anna, then Mike Lane. Deborah.
Yeah, thank you, Martha, and thanks, Amanda, for spending time with us every month. I'm trying to understand. I remember seeing a news report that Speaker Pelosi had offered to reduce the House's ask to $2 trillion from the $3 trillion in the HEROES Act, and of course the Senate was at $1 trillion. So I'm trying to understand why we keep hearing in the news and from the Republicans that the Democrats are intransigent and haven't budged.
Well, so, I mean, the fact pattern is true. Senator Schumer and Speaker Pelosi in their negotiations offered to reduce, the HEROES bills at 3.4, and I think we were at 1 point. Gosh, it's really unfortunate that we can't keep track of our trillions, but they were at 1 point something. And so the last offer before they got up and the administration walked away from the table was to come down $1 trillion and for them to come up and meet in the middle of good faith, which is by definition what a negotiation should be. The constructs were not to fight about how that money would be allocated, but let's at least start by agreeing at a dollar figure. And they walked away. And so that is something that Senator Schumer has not missed an opportunity to speak to when he's been interviewed, when we've traveled the state trying to continue to rally support for the important components that we need to be funded. And so I believe that message is out there as well. Beyond that, what information has been picked up more or what sources are quoted more, sort of beyond our control. But I assure you that from a messaging standpoint, no opportunity has been left and no stone unturned to make it clear that there was good faith willingness and overtures to negotiate, and that both the speaker and the senator never walked away from the table.
Thank you.
Anna Kellis.
Hi, Amanda. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi, Anna.
Hi. I'm curious. I mean, this honestly, listening to this, it sounds more dire than even I thought. There's a lot to get done in a really short period of time, and it sounds like there hasn't been really any even informal indication of a coming back to the table. So I'm curious if there has been sort of any informal indication that the negotiation, or at least the conversation about a stimulus, is still possible. And then the second part of that question is whether there's any discussion of funding individual pieces that aren't necessarily part of a stimulus, like discussions about economic recovery. We've been discussing at our HED meetings a tremendous need for workforce development if we're going to have legitimate economic recovery, so that we have people meeting their our skills match the jobs that are coming out of this pandemic. So I'm just curious, those two questions.
So in terms of any informal or formal, negotiations, there are, I think it's fair to say there are always overtures. And any time that there is any sort of communication, the willingness to want to discuss is always out there. At least I can speak for any kind of conversations that the senator may have had with, I guess what I would say is whenever an opportunity presents itself to again sort of engage, those are not overlooked. obviously it is critically important to us and I believe to the majority of our country that we get the needed relief. And so we don't overlook that. There are no formal negotiations that are currently going on. In terms of having sort of standalone measures, you know, there are discussions, there have been discussions from various entities about, you know, what they might call it, they call them skinny bills, which is something stripped down. So maybe like a skinny heroes bill. I don't think the administration wants to call it heroes, but and some discussions about smaller piecemeal efforts to address areas. The speaker has said that she's pretty steadfast in wanting to try to do something that's all encompassing because she's, and I'm not speaking for her, I'm just regurgitating what she has publicly said, that the urgency and the opportunity to address so many of these necessary things starts to diminish if pieces are sort of carved off.
Of course. Yeah.
That will or will not happen. That's just sort of the general way of discussion. There are some bills out there, though, that do deal with some components. A few I could point to is there's an education bill that Senator Schumer did with Senator Murray and a host of others. That was to, with the intention to provide needed relief and support to our K-12 education and then some support to higher ed, because obviously we're now there, but when the bill was conceived, we weren't there yet. We were on the processes of having to resume some sort of in-person education, and it was then and is now paramount that it's done safely. And in order to do so, resources are critically necessary. That probably is even more acute when we see the fiscal challenges that the state has and some of the cuts that are being discussed, real cuts for our school district. There was a standalone bill to try to deal with unemployment and to try to do an overlay for the pandemic unemployment. There was a standalone bill to do some more relief for different sectors. One of them, there's a restaurant and hospitality bill to try to deal with some economic support for that particular sector. There's another bill that's broader to provide some more additional support for small businesses. So there are some efforts and measures that are out there. I don't think any outcome is off the table, but there's no concrete path forward for any one way to address those at this point.
Thank you.
We are back in session. We will have a little bit more clarity as, while I know that the senator is in regular and daily communication with his caucus, I don't know what is happening on the majority leader side.
Okay. Mike Lane,
Some
and
of
then,
those do have some bipartisan support.
I'm sorry, what has bipartisan support?
Some of those bills, do. They're not just strictly, I know that, for example, the Restaurant Act has quite a bit of bipartisan support. I could go back and look. I think there may be a few Republicans on the education bill that Senator Murray was doing.
Okay. Thank you. Mike Lane, and
But
then,
none of them have been brought up by the majority leader. I mean, that's
okay, that the education bill has been put together. You said Senator Murray is the lead on that, and there are some Republicans.
Yes, but none of them, but the biggest sticking point with any of those is that the majority leader has to want to bring them to the floor.
Okay, and he hasn't. All right, Mike Lane, and then Henry.
Hi, Amanda. Welcome back. Wondering about airlines and funding for them, which is about to run out, and we're seeing threats of huge layoffs in the airline industry, which comes down to us here in Tompkins County, is affecting our airport and the financial stability of it. We just spent a whole lot of money to upgrade it. It's now the Tompkins, the Ithaca Tompkins regional, not only regional airport, it's the Ithaca Tompkins International Airport, because we want to be able to solicit airlines from Canada, for example. Are you hearing anything about trying to continue to support these airlines?
So there are a couple of different things. In the HEROES Act, there was significant funding, which is not for the personnel side and not for the airlines, but for the overall infrastructure operation of smaller airports. There was a significant amount of money to help provide operational support for our small airports, because obviously we know that across the board, air traffic is down, and obviously revenue is down, but it is much more pronounced and harder to manage in smaller communities than it is in a bigger community where there still is some traffic and other means to support. So we have been very supportive of that, and it's something that we would like to see retained in the negotiations for a COVID bill. There are separate conversations about how to deal with the likely impending layoff that the airline industry is discussing. Now, it's important to, keep in mind the focus of those discussions. Obviously, in previous circumstances, there were big bailouts that went to airline industries that did very little to trickle down to actually taking care of the workforce, the men and women who literally make the trains run, and much more to the executives and buybacks and all of those kinds of things. Some of the measures that are being discussed are targeted at trying to protect the workforce. And so, we are interested in those conversations. There's not a lot that has solidified as of yet, but that certainly is a discussion that is happening. And Senator Schumer has certainly been involved in conversations with stakeholders and is acutely aware of that. And I would hope and suspect that as we get into the legislative session, and maybe we'll be able to share some more updates on what is happening, what is not happening. It's just hard right now when we're sort of treading water until folks come back.
Thank you. The senator, I know, has always been a real supporter of our upstate airports, so we hope he had some success in his discussions.
Thanks, Henry. You're muted, Henry. I guess. Looks like you're not, but.
Yeah, it looks like I'm not, except for.
All right, you're coming through very, very quietly.
Is it better now?
That's
Yes.
better.
Okay. I was not muted before either.
Okay.
Amanda, thank you. We noticed that state and local aid seemed to be the sticking point before. I assume that it still is. And also, has Mitch McConnell got involved in the negotiations, or is he still sitting on the side and it's through the administration and the Democrats?
So state and local has been a priority of Senator Schumer's, and it has been, somewhat controversial in the sort of the total players in the negotiation process. Going back to when we had the CARES Act, which seems like a lifetime ago, I think that was in the beginning of April. That was the first bill that was put forward, and there was no money and no provision afforded for state and local direct aid. And so that began sort of the fight, and we were actually successful, Senator Schumer single-handedly actually, in getting some money to go to localities, but it was paltry and resulted in municipalities with populations of 500,000 or more being the recipients of any aid. And as we know across the country, but obviously even in our own state, that barely begins to scratch the surface of the need. When we had to do a supplemental to the CARES, his first proposal that came from Mitch McConnell was to replenish the PPP program, and that was the only intention for the supplemental. We also pushed back there because at the time, and still rings true, that's a one-legged stool. So yes, taking care of our small businesses was critically important, but also ensuring that our healthcare institutions had funds and resources to continue to take care of the public health, and that our localities remain solvent so they could provide the necessary services was the 3 points that we argued for. And we were able to bring together a proposal that got on board all of the various stakeholders. Oftentimes, you'll see, the cities are supportive of one measure because CBD communities and hamlet communities get taken care of, or the associations of counties like something, but the cities don't because they're left out. And almost all the time in proposals, the very small localities are kind of left with nothing. And so we were able to negotiate a formulaic agreement that gave money to every size municipality, whether they were CBD entitlement or not, whether they were a village, a town, or a city. And so that was part of what the supplemental was supposed to include, and we fought for. And Mitch McConnell and the administration would not budge on giving anything to state and local. So that continued even into the end of April and the beginning of May to be a sticking point. As you know, we were able to get healthcare funds, and we were also able in the PPP program instead of just blindly giving it to any kind of size small business. We fought for carve-outs for community banks and women and minority-owned businesses to make sure that they weren't being overlooked as they had previously. So it was a small win. And then we get to HEROES, and the HEROES Act has a huge, almost some people would say cartoonish allocation using that same formula, which would make sure that all localities and all municipalities of all sizes would be included. And it, as you know, passed the House and went to the Senate. And so Mitch McConnell, in his comments, has largely been an advocate for communities and cities going bankrupt, and has never embraced making sure that localities and states get direct aid. The White House, who really has been in the driver's seat throughout the negotiations, and been the front person, McConnell has proceeded to the fringes. Certainly, I'm sure if he was asked or told to do something, he would engage, but he's let the administration be the lead negotiators. And they have had no interest in seeing that our localities get funding. So that's where we are. The need for direct aid is something that is critically important. I don't foresee the Speaker or Senator Schumer backing down on the aggressive advocacy that those components be included, because as you don't need me to tell anybody on this phone call, if we can't maintain our local services, whether it's just from the factor of being an employer or providing those critical services to our constituents, we're in deep trouble. And so, we will see how the next couple weeks unfold. But to date, he's not been really at the forefront of the negotiations, and it has continued to be a real sticking point.
Thank
And
you.
it's wrong.
Yeah, thank you very much for holding to that. We're resigned to not getting anything, and our budget meetings start a week from Monday, and we have some really big holes that aren't going to be filled. So we really appreciate that. Let me ask about another piece of legislation that is a must pass. You talked earlier about the Transportation Reauthorization Act, or the reauthorization of the Transportation Bill Act, whatever.
Yep.
Do you think that'll go forward just on a CR as well, or extension?
Yeah, so that's an every 5-year bill.
Right.
And where broadly things stand with that is there's various components of it. There's what is it called? The surface, blanking on the name, I'm sorry, the surface something, it's like I wish I could remember the name, but it's what probably you're most interested in was really considering to be the most critical piece, and that's the nuts and bolts of the infrastructure. I think that number, so that part had been worked on through committees and the appropriations process, and there was a number assigned to that bucket within the Transportation Reauthorization Bill, roughly like $280 billion. It was bipartisan and sort of agreement, and obviously we support and have been an advocate for as robust funding as we can. There are other portions that were not done, so some of the safety components, the matters that had to do with trucking issues, some of the finance pieces, not to be confused with the appropriation, but the finance pieces were not finished. And so, we're nearing the end of that fiscal year. So there's no doubt that there will be some sort of CR until the legislative process can sort of resume and they can take that back up. And I suspect that we won't see really anything more moving forward on that until we get through the election and enter back into budget negotiations.
Okay, thank you. I think we have broad support here for not just for roads and bridges, but airports and multimodal transportation and transit as well. I know that's all in your advocacy as well.
I mean, without doubt, infrastructure funding, support, upgrades, and expansion has to be a key and critical part of the post-COVID economic recovery. No question.
Right, absolutely.
That will be a priority.
Well, we appreciate that. One other question, if you have time for it, about the census. Our hearts are kind of broken here about about the deadline being shortened. We're here. In fact, the next speaker is going to be the regional director for the census, operating 10 counties, but he says he's short-staffed and they're working as hard as they can. But the shortened deadline is a real problem. Do you see any kind of relief? Is there any kind of action? Are there going to be any hearings in either house about moving the deadline up? And is there anything that is even possible to get done to change this?
So So I know that there have been some efforts of various, I don't know if I'm correctly using the right term, but you'll get big regional authorities that are tasked with administering the census that have asked congressional leadership to sort of intervene in the changes to the census schedule to ensure that we have a robust an accounting process as possible. I think the most recent, and I'll be honest, the sort of my awareness of what I'm speaking of is just something I picked up recently and just reading. So I believe much of the outreach has only recently happened, and they're doing so during a recess. So I would suspect that when we resume, we'll have a little bit more feedback on, what measures might be being talked about or what plans might be to try to be helpful. Obviously, Senators is supportive of having an accurate, robust, and full accounting census process because it is so important on so many levels. What can be done to sort of blunt or change the determinations made? I'll be honest, I'm not entirely sure. I suspect that it will require efforts from both branches of our legislative, our Congress, we'll call it, is the right way to call it. And I don't know how much cooperation we will have on the Senate side or not. But I will certainly be happy to provide a little bit more update as we kind of get rolling next week and see what we're hearing.
Thank you very much, Amanda. Just looking at the census website on the response rates, New York State is below the national average. And it's not a parochial thing here. It's a tragedy nationwide to have an incorrect, incomplete count. And the long-standing consequences are profound. And I guess that's
of course
why
Absolutely.
This is being
Everything
done.
from Medicaid to SNAP to the free lunch program to Pell Grants and Section 8 housing and HEAP and other sorts of low-income housing assistance. Those things are all driven by census data.
Mm.
And obviously, if you underrepresent the populations, you're going to underrepresent the need, and then have a disproportionate aid that comes into those programs. So it is critically important. I couldn't agree with you more, and I know that the senator shares those sentiments, and we hear you.
And we're going to be asking the legislature to go on the record at our next meeting, asking for some sort of mitigation of this deadline. And so we'll obviously get that to you as well.
Yep, I will.
All right. If you have a couple more minutes, do you have a couple more minutes if there are any other questions? We've also got Mike Hall on the I'm sorry?
Do one more.
One more.
I could at least do one more.
Okay, Mike Hall or Diane Miller, Natalie Branoski, anybody have a question? Legislators?
Nope, just good to hear Amanda's assessment of what's going on or what's not going on in Washington, and appreciate it.
And that was Diane, so.
Yeah, I don't recognize Diane's voice anywhere.
Good. Good. Thank you very much. And just, I guess, one other thing, and I know in the HEROES Act, the FEMA formula for reimbursement to localities was plussed up so that FEMA would reimburse COVID expenses at 100% compared to the typical 75. We, of course, would support that. We just voted last week, or last meeting, to put up to $300,000 for the next 10 weeks into community testing, so we can continue surveillance testing in the community and continue that to be free to our residents. So we hope
along those lines, Martha, just a quick question: how are we faring countywide? I know I saw a small cluster at Cornell was detected, but nowhere near paling comparison to what's been going on in Oneonta and elsewhere. How are we doing with the students back and numbers?
There've been, our numbers got to be so low over the summer for more than a month that now we're like pretty disturbed at seeing 6 or 7 or 9 at a
Right.
time, with good reason, because pretty soon that's 50. We hope not. Our sense is that Cornell is taking aggressive action with those students. There've been some suspensions. We are doing, our law enforcement is following up when we see complaints. Apparently the last cluster was actually a few small parties or small gatherings. So not the 50 or 100, kids on the sidewalk, but just small gatherings where people were not using masks, were not socially distant. So we're hoping that this is a wake-up call, that students and the rest of the community will pay attention, that, this can happen kind of anywhere when you mix bubbles, basically, and people need to really maintain their vigilance. So we're hoping that this is being nipped in the bud. Henry, you want to
And the
have?
school
Yeah,
district, the city school district, right, is delaying in person, correct?
Right,
For a bit, I think.
right. And there's a mix of choices among the school districts in the county.
also TC3 has reported 1 case and Ithaca College has reported no cases as of yet.
Did you hear Henry,
Fingers
Amanda?
crossed. Yes, I did.
Yeah, fingers crossed, right. Everybody knock on wood. So we're,
To note though, Ithaca College is not doing testing of their own. That's through the county, as is TC3. So just to be clear, they're not comparable for a
mhm.
lot of reasons. They also
And-
make different choices about online and in person.
And we should acknowledge that Cornell has provided $150,000 directly to the county to support, in general, to support the efforts we were making and with COVID, and we're really deeply grateful for that. That's a big help at this
I
time.
also saw they have their own, they're working an on-site laboratory. The
Yeah.
process testing.
Diane or Gary or Zoe, do you want to, maybe Gary was the best person to answer that? Local?
Yeah, I mean, the lab setup is tremendous. I mean, we've tested thousands of people so far. And I just want to note that everybody on this call should know we have this data dashboard that we're updating every day at the end of each day. And so that's the real numbers are there. And as Frank, the public health director, said last night, that about working with Cornell and the new cases coming from people who were already in quarantine because they were in close contacts with the initial 9 people. And he said, this means the system is working. And there's been no additional exposure as far as the health department knows. So there's a lot of backstories on everything beyond just the numbers. And we're working it hard. And I would just encourage people to look at that data dashboard every day, because that's where we're keeping track of things, including the number of tests we're doing every day.
It's a very accessible website. Just you can Google Cornell COVID dashboard. It's really easy to find it.
Excellent.
Thank you, Gary. Appreciate that.
Yep.
So Kathy Covert, I don't see Mike Kaplinka-Lair calling in yet. Am I not? I don't see that, but is he there by any chance?
No, he has not joined us yet.
Okay. Well, Amanda, we'll keep you on as long as you want.
I can do one more. I have a 12:15-ish Zoom call that I'm supposed to get on that nobody has gotten on yet. So I'm monitoring it on my other computer. So
Thanks so much, Amanda. We deeply appreciate that. I will say we're grateful for the recent win on the national parks authorization and the it was $3 billion, I think, for funding for deferred maintenance in the parks and consideration of our area as a what's the phrase, historic cultural special region of some sort. I know you folks are behind that.
yes, that was a good win, a little bright spot, and there's a lot of frustration, and obviously I think it'll have some significant impact. And preserving our history is obviously important, but also I think we have seen in many of those outdoor, our outdoor spaces that have provide respite and recreation for people during this pandemic. And now more than ever, if we haven't gained an appreciation for those sites, I don't know when we will. So
Absolutely.
it's good, and we'll keep going, hopefully.
Absolutely. We appreciate the senator's
How about,
leadership on that.
Just any quick updates on how local business is faring, those who are able to avail themselves of the PPP support, EIDL loans, anything like that? Any comments, criticisms, suggestions as we go forward?
I probably can't, or I don't know if we can give you that kind of information, but we do have Natalie Bronowski on here. Wait, did she go away? She went away. She's our workforce development director. Our unemployment rate is about 10%, and that's about 10,000 people. So it's very significant. We saw the president or the CDC's announcement of eviction, continuing a moratorium on all evictions through December 31st. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Because of the public health nature.
Right.
That just came forward, so I really haven't digested. Obviously anything that has actual teeth to help protect our we're all vulnerable, but I think is important and a good thing. I assess these things with one eye open because many of the measures, and again, I say this flying really blind on that because I've read top line headlines on this. I have not had time to do any real deep dive. Don't necessarily have the same teeth. Sort of, when those executive orders came out a few weeks ago, many of them do nothing. We're going to study how maybe we can stop evictions, or so I guess we'll wait and see. But anything that if it works, then it's a good thing. I caution folks as we've seen with the executive order that added the extra unemployment benefit back to states that asked for it. That came using the Stafford Act, which is part of FEMA, that essentially braided the hurricane fund. So that's where we were paying for these funds in the high point of hurricane season.
Mm-hmm.
So some of these things have one step potentially forward and then 4 negative consequences going backward. Another one will be the suspension of the payroll tax that went in force this week. That's not obviously that directly is money that supports Social Security, which is a whole other challenge to think about. But, again, on its face, it sounds promising, a few extra dollars in people's paychecks, but they're not absolved from those obligations. They're temporarily paused. So I don't know if this measure from the CDC has similar sorts of challenges or, its face sounds hopeful, but I will reserve judgment until I get some feedback from folks smarter than me on the true policy analysis of if it can be enforced and what that actually means.
Well, what I heard was that it did not include any funding, so it's not actual rent relief. So the rent would be due at any point.
Correct. It's just kicking a can down the road.
Right. So.
Which in the short term, keeping anybody in their home is, for now, is, I don't want to discount that. Because certainly that's important. But again, I hate to go back to the HEROES Act, but I will. The HEROES Act had real, meaningful dollars and cents for rent relief, home support, to make sure that people could pay their obligations and stay in their domiciles, which is really the answer.
Well, maybe we can spin this as an acknowledgement that the relief is needed, but push that towards negotiating to put money behind it too. So optimistically.
Hopefully.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Amanda. I want to respect your time. We really love hearing from you and appreciate your time every month. Thank you so much and good luck.
Thank you too. Thanks to everybody for the work that you're doing, because you're really there on the street level, keeping the trains going and taking care of so many. So it's very much appreciated. And I will be happy to join soon again. And hopefully, we'll be in the middle of some sort of legislative session where I can have a little bit more concrete information of what is going on.
Wonderful. All right. Wonderful. We really appreciate that, Amanda. Have a
All
good
right,
month.
Thank you, everybody. Stay safe.
Take
Okay,
care.
bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. That was different. So, and I don't, Kathy, you still don't see Michael Plinkalaire, correct?
No.
Okay. Well,
Wait a minute. Wait, someone's coming in.
somebody's coming in. All right. While that happens, any discussion of all that? Any thoughts or reflections from committee?
Only that it is as grave as anyone thought it might be, is as grave as she just painted. I'm not exceptionally hopeful that that we will see any funding of any of those things. It sounds like all of the bills that are even skinny bills, they seem to hit a roadblock. And you know, the more I listened, the more it was clear to me that, you know, keeping the census count low and blocking any stimulus and prioritizing states and cities in going bankrupt is a sort of disgusting way of shrinking government. You know, I think that that's the goal. So if that's really the goal, then all of these decisions make sense. The unfortunate thing is that it exacerbates inequities and it creates tremendous suffering. And it seems that that is an okay compromise to some of these federal decision makers. And that's scary to watch and listen to. So anyway, it was sobering. This was a very sobering call.
Yeah, it is. There's when you stack up all the things that have to happen by September 30th, and they're on break, and they only come back for like 2.5, 3 weeks before all that happens. It is really, it just seems so profoundly dysfunctional, you know.
Well, I don't see any evidence that anybody cares about anything much except staying in power and keeping their job and winning re-election.
Yeah.
And apropos of Anna's point, it really concerns me, this payroll tax elimination. You know, I'm starting to read that if this thing stays in force, Social Security will in fact be broke by 2023. And as a senior who depends on Social Security for a good chunk of my income, this is not happy news.
To be clear, Social Security being broke, it means that the existing funds won't be able to pay the full benefits. It's not like, doesn't all crash and burn. So,
well, yeah, so that makes a big difference, Martha.
I know. I will say, I think what I've heard on the news is that most businesses are not even offering this to their employees because they know it just has to get paid back next year. And I think next year is when it would get paid back. It's not it's just deferring it.
As promised, if he gets reelected, he's going to eliminate it.
Yeah, there's that. True. Just one other thought about the negotiations. And I think, Kathy, we do have Michael Plinkalaire now. Is that the phone number I see?
I think so.
Okay. One other thought about the negotiating strategy is,
Gotta unmute himself.
we remember back in April when we were trying to get state and local aid put into the fourth bill. And Tom Reed kept saying, well, you know, it's okay if it's not in this one, it'll be in the next one. And we kept hearing from Amanda that, you know what, if it's not in this one, it ain't going to be in the next one, or there might not be a next one. She was righter than he was. So I think the strategy here from the speaker is very much that, you know, we're not going to just agree on the things you agree on. We need to have, you know, compromise means talking about the things we all want, not just the things you want. So I don't think that that's a wrong strategy. I think she's, you know, Charlie Brown with a football if she just agrees to things that the other side wants. Okay.
Martha,
And just to note, I just want to note, Martha, what Sue Dale Hall wrote in chat that I couldn't agree more with. Childcare money in New York State hasn't all been released yet, and childcare is supposed to be one of the bipartisan areas of support.
Right.
But it seems very often those things that are bipartisan are used as leverage to reduce, and then they walk away anyway. So I'm very confused and concerned about any of these moving forward. But yes, it is true that it is the one that is bipartisan.
I will say that, and I heard you, Mike, just one second. I would say that the fact that some of the states haven't spent all the child care money is one reason why the feds aren't supporting more child care money. Is they're
Right.
pointing to that and saying, hey, you haven't spent what we already gave you. So, maybe we should turn our focus on that. I know Sue would agree with that. Mike Lane, and then I see Michael Plinkler.
Just a brief comment based on our conversations here is that the cold truth is counties are on their own, and they, as always, will not only have to find their own way, but they will be the piggy bank for New York State.
Yeah. There you go. Well, okay, Michael Plinkler, are you with us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, great. Thanks very much for joining us. Would you correct me because I've been making up your title? Nice. First, tell us what your title is, all right?
It's Partnership Specialist. Essentially, it's outreach across 10 counties to have networks mobilize their networks to get people to respond to the census.
Okay. All right. And can you tell us what the counties are?
I cover Tioga, Cortland, Shenango, Broome, Seneca, Yates, Tompkins, Chemung, Schuyler, and Steuben.
Okay, so it's I think
A lot of southern tier.
right. But the central part goes up to the Finger Lakes too. Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much, Mike, for joining us. We wanted to hear more directly from you to try to understand what's going on with the deadline for collection of data and reporting it to the White House, to the president, et cetera. We would like to go on record on this, but we wanted to hear from you what the current status is.
Yes, the current status is the president's memorandum that the data will be delivered by December 31st of this year with no extension. As you are aware, because of COVID, the director of census asked for a 4-month extension, and the entire Census Bureau acted on that request as if it would be implemented. And therefore, the ending of the collection time was extended until October 31st, with the hope that the data would be analyzed and delivered to the president by April 30th of 21. As of a memo in late July, the president has asked for the data to be delivered December 31st of 20. So, although all systems were go to keep collecting data until October 21st, the director of the census, based on the president's request, said we will stop collecting data as of September 30th and only have 3 months to analyze, eliminate duplicates, clean up the data, and get it to the president by December 31st of this year. So that is the president's request to stick to the original timeline. We do have enumerators out in the field, and it will be going back to households if no one is responding, as many as 6 times, to have households that have not responded respond, but they have until September 30th to do that. And I think a letter would be useful, a resolution would be useful. There are lawsuits, and there are other municipal entities and governments that are weighing in to say this is unacceptable to have such a short because of COVID, to have such a shortened time to collect the data, particularly for certain constituencies and certain populations, and also to turn that data around in such a short amount of time. And therefore, a letter to that effect may gain momentum, but I cannot encourage or discourage the content of that letter. I can just help to review it for facts.
We totally understand that. And hello, Barbara Lifton. I see you on the call. We'll be ready for you in a couple of minutes. We just got to start talking with Micah Plinka-Lair about the census. So you're probably interested in this as well. You're happy to come back or stay on. Deborah, I saw your hand.
Yes, thank you, Martha. Hi, Mike. How are you?
Good, Deborah.
Nice to hear from you. I'm curious to know, since the push for this is from the White House, and I mean, does the Congress have any control over this? Who would we address our complaint to? The president, who doesn't give?
The letter would be written to the director of the census, but you would certainly want to copy your elected representatives in Congress, so Senate and House representatives. But the Congress can pass, both houses can pass to say this is too short a time, and it will be up to the president whether to veto that or not. But that would be the pressure you would want to bring to bear.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so Mike Lane is chair of our Complete Count Census Committee. Mike, did you want to add anything or have any other questions in particular?
No, we sent a letter very recently, Leslin and I, regarding the issue of the potential undercount of students. So I would think that a similar letter would be, we could put together very quickly and send it out. And if we wanted to follow it by resolution, we could, but I think getting a letter in the mail quickly is important.
Okay. Mike Kaplinka-Lair and I traded emails yesterday, and we can try to do the letter as well as the resolution. Ann and then Henry.
Thank you so much for all of your work. I know this has been sort of a labor of love. So thank you. And I'm curious, we were having a lot of difficulty early on in getting people through the job training process. Were you able to fully fill all of the positions that you needed, or the workers that you needed? Are you, I heard, I think it was Martha said earlier there, or you did, that we're still short workers. But is that
Yes.
because we couldn't fill all the spots?
As you're aware, the positions will be temporary, and they're out in the field during COVID. So the response rate for various counties was lower than expected in terms of trying to hire people. Most counties that I mentioned, there are at between 80 and 90% of the number of enumerators in the field that we need. There has been some authorization of extra time for those enumerators, and actually a little mini award system for enumerators who are willing to put in a little bit more time in terms of some financial credit. So we are low, you're right, in terms of hiring, but because now the last date is September 30th, unless something changes, we're trying to utilize those enumerators in the field who are well-trained to extend their service, in terms of hours per week.
So to try to get more done.
Right, so there's not an opportunity. There's no time left for training other people. I had one other question, which is we talk a lot about the students being one of the populations that is the least, the lowest count. I'm curious if there are other populations, like the most rural areas, rural populations, or if there's certain areas with the county in particular.
Well, the two significant areas in Tompkins County are the high student population areas, but we do have some deficits in some of the rural areas that are not responding as much because of lack of internet connectivity, or they could be, we don't know for sure, could be seniors who are not maybe skeptical. There may be people who are of an immigrant status who are not clear about the safety if they do respond. So there are other reasons why people may not be responding. We are, as I mentioned, using every network we have to give assurance to those communities and to give opportunities for them to respond, whether it's by phone, literally people knocking on doors, community libraries, but also answering their difficult questions about, will ICE follow up if I fill out a census survey? But in Tompkins County, the predominant populations are the student populations, and Mike Lane is quite aware of the efforts the colleges are putting in to go way beyond what they have been asked to do and actually report as much of the off-campus housing information as they can. And that deadline has passed, and they have submitted that information.
They have submitted. Okay, thank you. That's great to hear. Henry.
Yes, Mike. I was wondering, I know initially when they cut the deadline that there was some legislative talk in Congress about changing things. Action regarding changing the date?
Yes, when COVID hit, there was a request by the director, and Congress was supportive to change the date to the president of to April 30th, and then correspondingly, the information to the states would be 3 months after that. But now we're back to the original time frame. Is that answering your question?
Yeah, but I was wondering about changing the date from September to October. That
Henry, you're breaking up.
change. Whether there's any
So the original change, when COVID hit, the original change that was tentatively granted and not refuted was to allow data to be collected until October 31st, and then to be analyzed and delivered to the president April 30th. That has been rolled back, as I just summarized previously. So there was an October 31st data collection end date that has now been advanced by 1 month.
So Henry, the point is it was sort of a tacit agreement. Congress asked that there be the census asked and the Congress agreed that there be an extension. There was no response from the executive. They went, okay, so we're going to assume that this extension is in play. And then the White House said no. Is that right, Mike Kaplinkalair?
Yes, and I did send to Martha the actual presidential memorandum. If people have time, they should read that memorandum as to the reasoning behind the president requesting that the original timeline be adhered to.
I will send that out to everybody. So, all right, we're gonna, if it's okay, I'm gonna shift over to Barbara Lifton, who's waiting here. Mike, thank you so much. I really appreciate your efforts.
Thank you.
Yeah, just one question. I think Anna started to say, so it's too late to hire and train more people, right?
There was a training yesterday at the library. So the people who were in the queue are still getting trained, but for someone to apply now, it essentially is too late, yes. But there have been trainings up until yesterday in the Tompkins County Library to get people out in the field. So people who were in the queue are still being trained and getting out there. But I will be willing to review a letter or a resolution for factual information if anybody wants to send it by me.
Okay, you bet. We'll do that. And we really appreciate your help. Thank you. And thanks for
All right. Thank you.
to count us.
All right.
All
Take
right.
care.
Thanks.
Bye.
Welcome, Barbara. We're delighted to have you here. And I see Margaret Johnson's also on the phone. Thank you for joining us. You're muted, Barbara. You can unmute yourself.
There
we go.
We got it?
Yeah, now we can hear you. Thank you.
Now mine says mute. Mine's the opposite of what you would think. Weird things going on today with my
We can hear
computer.
you.
Okay, great. So thank you. And you were sort of almost apologizing there for late or something. I purposely zoomed in early. I wanted to tune in and see what you guys are up to. I wish I had time today to zoom in earlier. Thanks very much for inviting me for this update. I think it's really useful. I think you guys are all following this closely. You know, it's mostly bad news from the state at this point. But let's start with a little bit of good news that I think you're all also aware of. At least to most people, it's very good news that New York State's on top of the list of states that have successfully flattened the curve on COVID. The state is on day 25 or something like that of under 1% a positive rate on testing. So we have a lot to be proud of there. Our county, of course, has a tremendous amount to be proud of. I know the board has been doing a lot here and just put out the money to do more testing. So thank you for the actions of the board and of course for Frank Krupa and the whole health department and all the work they've been doing. I know tons of people have been working very, very hard and we have a lot to show for it. And as you know, it allows us to start carefully reopening our economy. We're well into phase 4 and I don't know what that means for you folks in terms of revenues and where the county is. The state, as you know, is still in pretty good shape. I was trying to get a revenue figure where we are back in our last big conference, which was, you know, I don't know, 8 weeks ago, really, in terms of before the big session. We had 4-day Zoom session, passing hundreds of bills, including a couple for Tompkins County. The speaker had said that the revenues were down, I think, about 75% for the state. Terrible news, needless to say, at that point. So that's the bad news. The good news is COVID, that the progress we've made. Obviously, you know, the governor, I'm glad, you know, we passed the legislation in March. I was happy to, you know, there was a debate about it because as all of you also know, the governors of New York State have a lot of power. They have more power. The governor of New York State has more power than any other governor in the country because of the Silver v. Pataki ruling under the Pataki administration. More power than any other governor, more power than the president has in relation to Congress. Okay, very, very powerful governors we have. And all 4 governors, well, you know, longer story. But anyway, started under Pataki. This is the 4th governor that's had this power from the courts. We tried to fix that, frankly, and get back that power, but the people of the state voted it down as a proposition on the ballot some years back. So that's where things still stand right now. So there was a debate about whether we wanted to give our governor more power. Some would argue, look, this was just a clarification. We believe the governor had emergency powers, blah, blah, blah. You know, law has broad emergency powers, and this was just sort of clarifying that COVID is one of those, could be one of those declared emergencies where the governor has extraordinary power, if you will. I, for one, sat silent in that debate. I was like, you're kidding me. Of course we're going to give the governor this power. First of all, one person has to be in charge with an epidemic. The legislature cannot possibly run this show. You know, we can't be the ones day to day, week to week, making decisions. You can see what the governor's done, what the governor and staff have done day to day, week to week. This is an ongoing thing, and it's not a job for the legislature. That was very clear to me. So I was not saying now, let's not give the governor this power. And it was also I felt also very certain that the governor would do a good job with it. This is kind of one of the things in his wheelhouse, if you will. And almost everyone I talk to, you know, people come up to me on the street and say, don't you think the governor, I don't even ask them. They come up and say, the governor's done a fabulous job. And I agree. You know, we've done a good job at dealing with this emergency, but as we all know too, the virus isn't gone, it's with us. Caution's going to continue. And, you know, we're hoping that we don't have a big second wave. We'll see. The state's much better positioned. A lot of work on PPE with hospitals and so on, but we just don't know what the fall and winter are going to bring. Let's hope we can keep the numbers down. I was amazed. Maybe some of you saw the article in the New York Times today about the opening of the New York City school system. I didn't realize the rate in New York was quite that low, 0.6% in New York City. So they've really driven the numbers down there, and that's good news too for all of us. And our numbers upstate are, you know, are good too overall, certainly in this region. So
I just want to,
yeah.
So totally, we were expecting maybe another 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I'll get just start. I don't know. Give me a high sign. But I've just got another. I did go on a bit there, but I think it'll be wrap up quickly.
Okay.
You want some questions, I guess.
Yeah.
But we also made explicit in that law that we did that we retained the right as the legislature to come back. If we thought the governor was overstepping, doing something that was wrong, we could reconvene within 10 days and reverse it to, you know, say, no, that's not what we're doing. We did not give up legislative authority when we clarified that the governor had the authority here to do the kinds of things he's been doing. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, the rest is bad news. You've all seen, I'm sure, $14 billion hole in this year's budget. Terrible news. 30 billion over 2 years. Sorry, Anna. I didn't know when I made my decision in December and January. I had no idea COVID was coming.
Right.
I hope the feds come through and you don't have a miserable first year. We were coming out of recession. I had a pretty tough first year. So maybe that's how we
can
get our
get
tops.
together.
I was very glad, thank you to you folks, the whole board, for your resolution to the federal reps about the need for a federal package. Thank you. I was glad that you were directing that to the federal government. Obviously, the state is very broke. I'm usually the one saying, look, we're never broke. It's all intentional, and we can fix our tax system and raise some money. But now we're actually quite broke, and it's not clear. I've said, look, if we want to, been plenty of talk, and I've been one of the talkers on this, of course. Martha, you've noted my efforts here of saying, I'm happy to tax the billionaires a bit, whatever we can do. But at best, we could probably raise $3 to $4 billion, and we've got a $14 billion hole in this year's budget. So we need a strong federal package. You're probably seeing the latest, I'm checking every day. Is there a federal agreement? Is the GOP starting to come to the table on a federal agreement? No. The latest from Trump, Mnuchin, McConnell says, I think 1.3 trillion, but no aid to states there. Nothing in state aid. So they don't like helping the states. We'll see. I'm not keeping good track of where the red states are, where Arizona and Florida and Texas are. But I have to think they're going to be screaming pretty soon for a federal package and federal aid to states too. I don't see how they're going to manage, but we'll see. There's obviously kind of a tacit agreement there that, we're not going to do that. The governor's already said he's got to withhold $324 million to our schools. The payment due about now. That's very bad news. Again, we need a strong federal package. Martha, you asked me whether there was any possibility you thought of a temporary waiver on the 2% local property tax. I've heard no discussion about that yet. It's hard to advise, but I'm kind of a never say never person on that sort of thing. It's obviously, I think, a pretty sensible thing to be thinking about. I think counties ought to, especially if we have to sit back, if we continue in this situation without federal aid, how long does that go on? If we get an aid package, it's a whole different picture. If we get a real aid package, the National Association of Governors have asked for $500 billion, that bipartisan group. So if something like that came through, we'd be in a new day, and that could happen after September 7th? Is that when they're returning? But negotiations are going on now. That could happen in a couple days if they wanted it to. That would be a new thing. But if this goes on and we don't see a federal package, I'm ready to have I'm certainly willing to talk about any, as you know, I've always had concerns about these caps, arbitrary caps, telling local governments that, that it's, we're going to cap your taxes. It's not your decision as local democratically elected leaders. I've always had a problem with it. And so I'm happy to have that discussion. I can't say it's being, we haven't conferenced in several weeks. I'm happy to raise it. The governor's come out with a statement a week or two ago saying, he doesn't really want to tax the billionaires, doesn't want to tax the wealthy, not crazy about that idea. We'll see. It may have just been a trial balloon. It may have been, sometimes there's a public negotiation that goes on. And I have no idea, as you know, this is one of his prize things, the local property tax cap. First year, I think, and it was his priority, first or second year. And so but maybe he'll budge on it too if he realizes that we're just up a creek without a paddle, and somebody's got to raise some money somehow, somewhere. So I would never say, I wouldn't say don't try to start that discussion. I don't know, and I'll try to get to some, I'll have my ear to the ground. Maybe we'll be conferencing soon with all this stuff about the cut to schools, and we'll have a discussion, and I'll see whether, I'll bring it up and see whether anyone thinks there's any hope in that. And I can always contact a few people and see it, try to get a sense of whether there's any possibility of that, out of a three-way agreement.
That sounds great. A couple quick questions. So in the chat, you mentioned that, I think you said Speaker Hasty said that revenues were down by 75% to the state.
A couple months ago. Yeah,
Is that all
somewhere in
revenue?
that 70, 78%. I can't remember. It might have been higher. It was in the 70s.
Was that
I'm guessing
before or
75.
after
That might have
the,
been 78.
was that before or after the tax filing deadline in
Well,
July?
that was part of that was because it got pushed back. The April deadline became July. So it was before the July, and that was part of it. And I
Okay,
apologize. I was trying to get a new figure from our Ways and Means staff this morning when I realized I didn't really have that number on the tip of my tongue, but I haven't heard back from them yet.
okay. So
I
yeah,
can get that. I can get that for you. I mean, I'm sure I can get it.
I mean, the 14 billion and 30 billion, those are numbers we've heard.
But we know the 14 billion, that's recent. That's within the last week or two. That's within the last week, the division of budget and the governor said $14 billion hole in the current budget. And by the way, the other point on taxes, we raise taxes, it doesn't kick in until January. You don't start raising those taxes until January. So it doesn't even affect this year's, it has very little impact on this year's budget cap.
Right. I've got Deborah and then Anna.
Yeah, thank you, Martha. Thank you, Barbara. We're going to miss you. You're a sweetheart. So a couple of questions. I don't know what the parameters of your discussion about the tax cap were with Martha, but even if people don't want to eliminate the tax cap, it seems to me that it would be sensible to eliminate temporarily eliminate the penalties for exceeding it. So just food for thought. But my main question is, I know there was a provision in the budget this year that the governor could take action at certain times based on the state's financial position, and if he did, the legislature then had X amount of time to act.
10 days. 10
Has
days.
he ever actually taken official action, or has he just been kind of withholding 20% here and 20%?
No, this is the first big withholding of money to, you've all heard the not-for-profits aren't getting their reimbursement money and all that. That's a big problem. Been feeding all that concern back. Tompkins Community Action, daycares, it's bad. But this is the first big cut of actual state funding, the withholding of $324 million to schools. So it's the first time that this dynamic is taking hold of, can we respond to this in some different way? The truth is, we probably can't. There's no money. We can't raise money quickly. So far haven't heard that we're going to reconvene and try to do something different. So this is the first time that this has faced us, and it's kind of crickets is what it is. It's very quiet. I don't think we have any response. Now we could have responded, for instance, on executive orders if we thought the governor went too far on something, but it hasn't been an issue. The climate among the leaders has been very cooperative, and people, there's a lot of discussion. Is this, the one thing that made people sit up in the first, after 2 or 3 weeks was the day the governor said, let's reimagine things, come out better, let's reimagine education. And he said, what do we need all these school buildings for anyway? And everyone kind of went, what? What is he talking about? And a lot of pushback very quickly, and that discussion went away very quickly.
So in other words, the other cuts so far have really just been delays, sort of like quietly delaying this.
They're not being called cuts. They're being called, they're just saying it's not prompt payment, Yeah.
Okay. And
So when did this happen, this 324?
It's just been announced in the last, within the last week.
is that was that billion or million? It must be million.
324 million.
Okay.
Total
All
school
right.
aid is about 30 billion.
Okay.
State to locals.
Okay. Anna.
He has put out that he's intending to cut schools by 20%. Is that this 324 million? This was
Well, that would be a quarterly, they get
held.
aid on a quarterly basis. I haven't sat to do the math, but I'm assuming this is a 20% cut on a quarterly basis. Although I'm not positive, Anna, I can check on that. I'd have to sit
Yeah,
and do
yeah,
the
so
math,
they
and I
might
haven't done that.
Right, so they may not actually get this.
I'm not hearing clearly.
Anna, could you,
Just that this,
Anna,
can you
cut
hear?
your video? Your audio is really breaking up. Anna, lost you. Yeah, okay, try again.
Yeah, my connection's terrible. Ironic that I'm working on broadband. I'm curious, the 324 million might not be a delay. It might be actually a 20% permanent cut, correct?
Yeah, it's being withheld. I believe it's being called a cut. Now, again, if federal aid came through, I'm sure it'd be restored. So, but it's right now, I'd say it's technically a cut.
And one of the things that we have been seeing is that the funding in the CARES Act for childcare, there's 65 million that is still being withheld that was allocated for childcare in the CARES Act.
Yeah.
Have you heard any word about that? Or is that something that when you talk about being able to go back to state to kind of hold them accountable for that, is that possible?
Good question. I've asked it several times about several of these things, and I really obviously don't get an answer. My sense is that even, it's a little funny because it was sort of like, okay, some of this is federal money that can only be used for this purpose. How can we hold it? How can we withhold it? How can we sweep it into something else? I'm not getting clear answers, but clearly the money's not going out the door. They're just saying no money. Almost no money is going out the door. What the rationale is for holding on to federal funds, I don't know. Maybe there's some. I honestly haven't gotten an answer, and I've asked a couple times. I'll try again to get an answer on that, Anna.
That would be great. And I just want to end by saying it'll be an incredible honor to follow your work, and I look forward to your continued mentoring.
Thank you, Anna, and I stand ready to support and assist as you wish and as you would like me to. It's a complicated place. You'll learn it quickly, but it's I'm eager to have you be successful. I'm sure you will be, but I'm happy to give you a little primer in the first year whenever you need one. Whenever you feel a need, if you feel a need.
Sounds great. Henry, last question.
Yes, thank you, Barbara, and thank you for all the work you did in terms of your questioning of Cornell. I really appreciated that.
It's always a tricky one, right? I mean, my job is multi-layered, and I fight very hard for Cornell in every year's budget and other things. I did a bill for them on student travel insurance this year. I worked on it for a couple of years. I fight hard for Cornell. They're very important to our community. I have great affection for all the people that work there on every level. But I also have to be a voice for my community, of course. And I heard from a lot of people with concerns, and I did my best to sort of mediate and bring those questions to Cornell. And, I think it helped to get the discussion, and, it's all part of the job. So thank you. I just, yeah. But as I said, I'm not the decision maker.
Right.
Department of Health, state, other people are making these decisions. I just thought it was appropriate for me to bring the voices of my constituents a little more strongly into that discussion.
Okay, my question is, in terms of the governor's changing of the budget and the legislative response, you're saying that the 3.24 million, you had nothing to do with the schools because there was no money. If the governor does in fact cut things by 20%, would the legislature have anything to do about the amounts going to different places, or would you just sort of say, well, we can't raise money, so nothing's going to happen?
Well, we could decide to convene and say, we should break up this cut. We should, the truth is the biggest parts of our budget are education and healthcare, right? Medicaid and PK and P through 12 education. So that's, like 70% of the state budget. So if you're going to see massive cuts, you're going to have to do big cuts. That's where they're going to happen. So, we have the discretion to go back. We can do anything we want. We can we could reconvene and say, no, let's cut the cut by 50 million or something, or let's put this cut over here instead. Although I'm not so sure that given the fiscal situation, though, given the budgetary situation, financial situation, that we even, that we have much room to maneuver at all. Like, it's not like money's going out someplace else, where we could say, well, take it from there instead. When you're broke, you're broke. And, I'm honestly, I haven't seen a lot of reporting on it. And again, we haven't conferenced in a while. So when we do, it's very specific. It's not like we sit usually for 10 hours and discuss everything under the moon, everything under the sun. But, I don't know where I was going with that, Henry, but we have discretion, but discretion doesn't mean anything when you're broke, Do we buy bread or milk today,
Right. I have also one other quick question. In terms of the hotel occupancy bill that you passed for the city of Ithaca, do you know what the status of that is?
Governor signed that bill. Yes?
Oh, he did?
Margaret? Governor signed that bill, didn't he? Or did that must have gotten signed. It might have been a pocket pass. I'll have to check. I think the governor's either signed it or I think be a pocket pass, wouldn't it? Has it gone to the governor? Sorry, Henry.
Yeah, I thought it had gone to the governor.
I turned to my staff on those to say, where is that? Has it gone to the governor? I usually know if it's on the governor's desk, but I kind of lose track in whether it's sitting in the assembly or the Senate and going. I didn't hear. I don't think I heard that he signed it. I assumed if it was going to go through, it would be at the state level. At the federal level, it's a pocket veto. If it hasn't been signed in a certain period of time, it's a veto. At the state level, at our state level, I don't know if it's true in other states, if it sits on the governor's desk for 10 days and ages and he doesn't do anything with it, it's law. It's a pass. So it's the opposite.
But it has to formally go to him.
It has to go to him.
The 10 days
to the governor, but if it sits around for more than 10 days, it's really 11 days because Sunday isn't included. And that allows the governor to let some things go without saying, I put my signature on it. Like he doesn't particularly like tax increases and those kinds of things. So it's the kind of thing where he might say, yeah, I'll let it go and I'm not going to put my signature on it.
Yeah.
Okay.
In terms of
okay.
Is Margaret around? Is Margaret? I don't know.
Yeah, Margaret asked to say a bill is not yet going to the governor.
Not gone to the governor yet? Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Henry, for updating me on my bill.
All right. And we know the legal department can hold on to things and analyze, and that clock doesn't start ticking until it actually goes to it.
Right.
And we've, in terms of many,
Martha, can I make a point? Sorry.
Yeah.
One of the things that happens on those kind of bills too, they all get pushed into late December,
Mm-hmm.
That's a tendency too with those bills that they don't really love. They all get done on December 31st.
Right. And we know you have been helpful in a few cases in pulling some of those out and making sure they got to his desk sooner. And we really, really appreciate.
Yeah, it's hard. I do call and say, look, can we get this sooner? But it's tough because they sort of control that. We say it's a cooperative thing, and it is, but they're only going to take it when they're ready to take it. We don't like to push too hard because we want them to sign it instead of veto it, right?
Right.
So we try to go with some protocol there.
And in terms of adjustments to the budget that the legislature might make, we are, I don't think it's paranoid to understand that county reimbursements, county aid, et cetera, is kind of the last place the governor likes to save. He is, when he decides he has to cut aid to municipalities, he takes it out of county reimbursements. So we understand that if there's going to be any relief for schools, for example, that's probably going to come out of what we get. So we sort of understand we're lower on the totem pole most days.
Well, obviously I'm not, the governor's not calling me to discuss these things. I don't know what, he hasn't called me in a long time actually, but, a lot of school, I don't know,
Look, it's hard to argue. I don't want to, we're not in a
it's,
position of,
they're all vital things, right? And,
and that's why we've been pushing on the federal aid. So
yeah.
about that. So again, thank you, Barbara, for your 18 years, is it? Many
Almost.
being an ally and a friend. And, I may just kind of send you a reminder every month and say, hey, you want to come back
Sure,
while
that'd be
you're
great.
still there.
And thank you all. Thank you all for your work. It's been a tremendous honor for me. It's been very meaningful, rewarding work. And I've been very privileged to serve.
Well, thank you. And this
All
is
for
not
your
goodbye.
support
This is
and
just
collegiality. I very much appreciate it.
good. Wonderful. Thanks so much, Barbara. Appreciate it. And I see we have Cornell in the house. We got Zoe Nelson. Hello,
Zoe.
Albany. We've got Diane Miller from Washington, and Gary Stewart is here as well. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for being loyal participants and contributors here. So, the floor is open for either federal or Albany kind of updates. Why don't you take it away?
So I'll go first because there's not much to report from Washington, as you heard from Amanda earlier. We're just, I keep reading in the press that the Senate may vote on something next week. It's not nearly as comprehensive as we'd like. And so, Cornell, we continue to advocate as forcefully as we can for comprehensive legislation that includes not just funding for higher education or research or for our students or our faculty, but also for our community, because it's we don't thrive if you don't thrive. And so we've got some good folks fighting on our side. So I see Allison just dialed in, and her boss is one of the strongest proponents of the local state and local assistance. So that's all I'm going to say from my report from Washington right now.
All right, that sounds good. Hi, Allison. How are you?
Hello. Good. How are you?
Welcome.
I'll plug my phone here so it doesn't ring on us all the time.
All right, we're just kind of getting minutes on the Cornell report from Albany and Washington. I think you just heard Diane. And,
yes.
Meet
Hi,
Zoe
Diane.
Nelson in Albany. Hi, Zoe.
Hi, everybody. So I see Barbara jumped off, but it's from our perspective been a pleasure working with her, and looking forward to working with future elected officials in the region. So as for a budget update, Barbara Lifton really covered most of it. From Cornell's perspective, we are we're bracing for a 20% cut. And right now, as you heard, that really is in the form of withheld monies. There's been no appropriation changes, but that is what we're anticipating. Initially the thought was 10% for state operations and state agencies and 20% for the local assistance. But SUNY, we're hearing a larger cut on that end. So we're looking at how that will play out for Cornell.
Larger than 20, or are you saying 20 rather than 10?
20 rather than 10, right? But nothing's in writing. But we're trying to make sure that we are prepared for all of that. So again, local assistance, we've heard the same things as you all. School districts down, that 20% number. Certainly. There has been, a new law that was passed allowing the extending rollover periods for bond anticipation notes. Hopefully that's helpful locally. I can't imagine it's going to plug all the holes, but that is one little bit of positive news for local governments. Mm-hmm. So, but even though we're facing cuts and the conversation is dominated by COVID and budget cuts, we're still doing research and activities for the state. Faculty, in fact, were just called yesterday to advise state officials on smart meters. So that's, again, things that we've been long working on. We're still trying to connect with state officials about, really moving the state forward and advising on the CLCPA and other big issues.
We are also sifting through the implications of the new 100 positive rule for, a virtual, for colleges turning virtual from New York State, that guidance. So we're working through that. It changes our conversation on campus. And so, that's just the way it is right now. But I would like to shift a little bit from budget and those considerations, and just want to say over the past several years, we have been thrilled to team up with you, Martha, with Jason Molino and others who come to Albany, and we work together on areas of interest both to Cornell and the county. And we think that's really different from other places around the state. I think that's been a really special collaboration. Not every county is the same. Not every county is as active. Not every county has a Cornell. And state government, as you know, is very centralized. We know a lot of the people who are making a lot of the decisions. And you folks know other folks who are in on these conversations. And so it's really great to team up on those. Some things in the past we've teamed up on: energy issues, non-pipe alternatives to gas, smart meters, like I mentioned, TCAT, Economic Development Council, projects, judicial appointments. So those are really, we fully look forward to continuing to work together to try and squeeze whatever funding we can out of the state. I know this period is really difficult, and particularly difficult on local governments. So we just stand by ready to work together, and have been really appreciative of the local leadership.
Thank you, Zoe. We really appreciate it too. And you and Charlie have sort of been like, any question I've got, like a really quick response, and it's really been great. You mentioned the CLCPA. We noticed, and we just passed a resolution last night, trying again to encourage a local role, county government role in any way with the CLCPA. I saw that Cornell has a number of faculty on several of the different panels. I think 2 on the agriculture and forestry, maybe 1 on the land use and local government panel as well, on a few others. So that's really great. And we love, and Bob Howarth is on the council itself. Mm-hmm. We love having access through the faculty members that we make it a point to know. But we really remain insistent. Well, it doesn't matter if we're insistent. We try to advocate for the counties to actually have a formal role. And that's what our resolution passed last night said. I don't know if there's going to be any outreach from the state on that, but we're just really, really disappointed that the panel membership came out last week and county governments are not represented anywhere at 127 appointments. So, Anna, I see you have a question. Anna?
Sorry, my puppy has dominated my keyboard. But
your dog
I
has a question?
Yes, right here, question. About the 100 cases. If Cornell, by, unfortunately, there is a chance, we hope that it doesn't happen, I think everybody, but if by some crazy chance Cornell does reach 100 cases, is it the procedure that would happen is that Cornell would go online for 2 weeks and then the state would reassess, and then it could potentially come back to in person, or is it that Cornell would shift to fully online from that point forward?
Right now, we're going to follow the guidance, and the guidance instructs us to close for 2 weeks, or just go virtual for 2 weeks, and adhere to takeout dining only, but just no in-person classes. So we would do that, I think, in partnership with Tompkins County Health Department and CMC, as we've been, partnering with them throughout daily, really try and get a handle on those cases, and hopefully we'd be able to move back to in-person instruction. Again, we're only doing about, a quarter to a third of classes are even in person at all at this point. So the shift would be, I guess, relatively minor. However, it would be a threshold that we hope we don't have to pass.
Okay.
Thank you. Just to understand the procedure.
All right. Thank you very much. We appreciate this. Sorry, we're a little bit behind on our agenda. And I don't want to take up Allison's time staring at our screen here. Thanks very much, Zoe. Great to hear from you, and Diane and Gary as well. So stick around. Happy to have you stay. And but I want to turn over to Allison. Welcome. Thanks very much for joining us again this month. So
Thank you.
usual question, like where are we? Federal bill.
Yeah, well, first I want to say
Start
I wish I was Anna right now because I would love to be with your dog. So I know Amanda was on earlier. I'm sure she gave you an update from her vantage point. So right now, the Senate and Tom is expected to be back in session. We're still hearing September 14th is the day they're going back. The Senate will be in session as well. We've been using this time, Tom has been using this time to really delve in. You might have been seeing a little bit reported in the papers that the Problem Solvers Caucus has been really targeting conversations between Mark Meadows and the Speaker to try to work out a deal so we can get this next package through when both the House and the Senate are back in DC. And the PSC has been coming up with some of their own top line numbers as well, both where they see agreement possibilities. I know that the Speaker and Mr. Meadows have spoken at least a couple of times in the past week, which initially was not happening at all. I can kudos to Congressman Gottheimer, who's Tom's counterpart on the Problem Solvers Caucus. He did a lot of pressuring on his end. Obviously, Tom has done the pressuring that he's able to do with the White House. They're a great team, and they just want to see some kind of deal being struck. With all the things that we've talked about in the past, obviously, I'm glad to see our higher education folks on here. They're doing a fantastic job trying to navigate something that, everybody's just learning as they go. I think Cornell can say that. I think pretty much any school. I noticed Tom's son went back to St. John Fisher, had some symptoms of a cold, got a negative test, but because he's a diabetic, they made him go to his primary care physician because he was like the first one. So it's all kind of just figuring it out as you go. And I know I commend the work that the schools are doing in our K through 12 as well, and they need help. And we know that. So that's definitely on the list. Obviously, the local aid, you all know, is Tom's top of mind. Making sure our hospitals get the resources they need, continues to be in the testing capacity to make sure that things can stay open as much as they can. Is something that, Tom is going to continue to push for. And that is all part of the conversation. I know that they've had some very in-depth conversations. They aren't releasing that information because the Problem Solvers Caucus is basically, they want to be a trusted group. They want to feel like that they can have those in-depth conversations and not have that information disclosed publicly until the time is appropriate. Until they've really come up with what they can agree on as a group. And those candid conversations are something that Tom values, and I know the members value, and that's part of the reason they're all part of that group. But we can disclose that the conversations are happening in the background. I know Senator Schumer's office has been involved as well, but it does really seem to be largely between getting the White House and the Speaker to come to an agreement on where they can meet. A lot of the disagreement has been in a top line number rather than talking about the individual programs, which is a little frustrating to Tom because, we really should be talking about how much funding is going to go towards each thing, like local aid, like hospitals and that type of thing, and not just one big overall number, because everybody's going to want to know how much money is going to local aid anyways. Even if you throw out one big number, it's really not going to matter because you don't know where the money's going. So that's been a big part of what they've been trying to figure out right now. And Tom would have gone back and voted sooner if we could have, but the Senate does not often leave town and come back. I think any senator would probably tell you that, Democrat or Republican. And especially, we are in a very politically driven time right now. Some of these senators are in tight races. So they're not going to want to come back when they don't when they don't have to. Same with the House. I'm not going to say that it's one or the other, but they are expected to be there. Right now, they're supposed to be there the week of the 14th and the week of the 21st. Let's hope that something gets moving in the week of the 14th, but stay tuned. I don't have a top line number for you yet. I can tell you that Tom is working on this daily. He's talking to Mark Meadows every day. And I know that there are conversations happening, which weren't happening before like end of last week. So at least they're talking. We're getting somewhere. I mean, that's sad to say that they weren't even talking, but when they went home, they were not talking. So.
Yeah. I mean, if you're not talking, how
are
can
you going to do anything, right?
Not talking, right?
Yeah. So that's where that stands at this point. It's like I said, September 14th is really the day when everybody's back in DC. Hopefully there will be something we're hopeful because of all these conversations happening now and trying to get this through now, something will be ready to be voted on that week. Also keep in mind that a lot of these people are hoping they don't have to be there 2 weeks in September because they'd love to go back to their districts and campaign through the November election. So the sooner, oftentimes that can kind of push people as well. I think I mentioned the last time we were on here, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the conversation largely now is not necessarily, it is a dollar figure, but it's also getting through March, April, May of next year. It's not necessarily one big pot of funding. It's more of like let's get through to March or April, see where we're at with a vaccine, see where we're at with the economy, and then determine how much more we need to spend at that time. So that has also been something that I know they've been kind of mentioning and trying to put in there. If the speaker and the White House can't come to, one full dollar figure, maybe something a little smaller through like March, and then come back at it when we don't know who the president's going to be at that point. We don't know if there's going to be a vaccine by that point. All signs are indicating that we're looking pretty good, but who knows? None of us can predict the future. So they're hoping maybe if they kind of do a shorter time frame, they might be able to reach an agreement. But we realize with local aid, there's a few things. Local aid, school budgets, they run through a certain time frame. So some of those things might be a little longer than March. When you're talking about municipalities and you're talking about school districts and their budgets, not all of them run through March, April, May. You're all on different budgets. So it'd have to be a little bit more flexible than that. And that is something that we do know.
Right, absolutely. I mean, I think our sense is more in line with, we saw what happened was it April when the CARES Act 2 was, whichever number it was, and state and local aid was left out. And Tom said, don't worry, it'll be in the next one. And we still haven't had the next one. So I think that, a negotiation really has to be stuff that both sides want to talk about, not just the stuff that one side wants to talk about. That's not really a negotiation. So I think from our point of view, I'm sorry, go ahead.
And that's really why I think Mitch McConnell, I think he will likely agree to whatever the White House agrees to at this point. And that's largely why, obviously, Tom had a relationship with Mark Meadows from when Mark Meadows served in the House. That's been very helpful. And I think that's largely why we're working through the White House at this point, because, odds are McConnell will come around to what the president is in agreement to. So we really need to get the White House and the speaker to negotiate, find some common ground here.
Yeah, I understand that. Do you have a sense whether Meadows is driving it or Mnuchin? And because my sense is that Meadows is, I guess I'm going to say, less friendly to our cause than Mnuchin was. There has been.
You mean in regards to local aid, and specifically, or something?
Local aid and aid in general. Getting something out the door. And
he's been very open to his conversations with Tom. They seem very willing to come to the table, I can tell you, and they know where Tom stands on local aid, especially. He's been I think, pretty outspoken about it. And obviously, one of the things that PPP, another round of that, they've also been talking about, they seem open. It just seems to be coming down to that top line figure. It's not even like, I mean, that's what's frustrating to Tom is like, everybody keeps coming back to this top line figure without actually talking about the individual programs. And like, if you can't get past the top line number and actually talk about the individual programs and how much needs to go towards each program, that just makes it very frustrating. And that's part of the work they're trying to do in the PSC is talk about the individual programs.
One more sentence. I kind of feel like the other way, like start with it. What's the framework? What's the bucket you're talking? How big is the bucket? And then you can talk about what goes in the bucket. But anyway, Deborah, did I see your hand up or?
Yeah, but Allison answered my question. I was just curious as to why McConnell seemed to be left out of the equation.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, it really seems to be, the issue seems to be between the speaker, and I know what's reported in the news, but it seems to be between the speaker and the White House in regards to where the final negotiation really needs to come from.
Thank you.
My guess is he's, doesn't have all the support in the world behind him, and he doesn't want to go out on a limb for something that the White House might not agree with. So let me ask.
Yeah, and it's a tough in the Senate. I mean, there are Republicans that won't always vote with Mitch McConnell. I think we all know that. And so it is, I mean, they're different. Their politics are different over there too.
I wanted to ask about the census, but let me go to Henry Granison first.
Yes, thank you, Allison, for being on again. What's the effect? And we heard earlier today from Amanda that the government runs out of money on September 30th, and that they possibly can do a continuing resolution. How does that timing affect the
Well,
bill?
sometimes these types of things will be tacked on to continuing resolutions as well. I haven't heard that discussed, but I could see that happening. I've been with Tom for 9 years. I've seen stranger things happen than that. And I think that might be a way to get it through. And again, if they do a CR, you're probably looking at something going through early next year to get through the election, figure out who the president's going to be, let them get their feet under them, whether it's Trump or whether it's Biden, and so that they can figure out where they're going to go from there. And so that would not shock me, Henry, because there's no way they'll pass a full budget, not on an election year. I can't remember the last time that happened on an election year. That would be crazy in DC. So
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
So we wanted to ask about the census and what is the congressman's position on the deadline for collections. We are concerned that there was an earlier, I guess the legislature, the Senate and House passed a request for an extension. The White House didn't seem to oppose it until just recently, I guess in July. They put out this memo saying, no extension. We need the data by December 31st. And not just that, but you have to stop collecting on September 30th. Does Tom have a position on that?
I mean, he hasn't, I don't think he's directly talked to the White House. I do know he'd be supportive of extending it. Obviously, we're in unprecedented times and it's made it very difficult to collect, especially in an area like ours, where I'm sure you all know if somebody's coming to your door right now. People, depending on where you live in a rural area, sometimes aren't answering their door anyways, or they might be answering it with a shotgun, let's be honest. In certain areas of our district, I know we've all knocked on doors in the district and I've been greeted that way myself. So, and right now during a pandemic, people are a lot less likely. And he said he's supportive of it. We were actually at a library over in Jamestown, maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago now, and we were talking about that. He's supportive of extending it. I don't think he's had like a specific conversation with the White House though at this point, but I can certainly check in with him.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's nearly impossible to collect door to door right now, too. It's very difficult. And I know we actually in our district, I believe the last I saw were pretty low in regards to reporting. Certain areas are better than others, but there are certain, and the funds just came out to support additional, getting you more information out there as well to like the libraries and some of the local nonprofits.
Right. We got our contract through to a local nonprofit for $12,000, but I mean, I would think that's something that that Tom would have some influence on. This is something where it's truly affecting New York that's going to lose at least one. And if we don't do better, we're starting to lose 2 congressional seats as well as the billions of dollars over the next 10 years.
Yeah. I'll touch base with him on it. I'm not aware of a conversation. Like I said, I'm not sure what conversations are happening in DC, but I will try to find that out for you.
Great. We appreciate that. And, it's obviously urgent that happens.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Or in fact, we're going to be putting a letter together to that, urging that there be this extension. And we're going to put a letter together this week and then also follow that up with a resolution. So,
yeah. Okay. Yeah. If you would share that with us, that'd be fantastic too. So we can make sure that we're working on that. But yeah, that is a fast approaching deadline for sure.
We will share it with you, Allison.
I know. No, actually, I really appreciate, oddly enough, through this pandemic, I feel like communication has actually become better. If one bright spot, I think, has become much better with all of our local legislators, which we appreciate. And we're going to continue doing our Zooms. We're not going to do them once a week, but we're going to do them at least once a month because we want to hear from you too.
Yeah, I was just getting ready to say that those calls have really been terrific. And, and
as soon as we have more info on this phase, so part of me, sometimes I'm kind of waiting until we have like an update on what's actually in legislation to kind of time it right. Seems like I've been failing lately because they keep pushing it out, but hopefully we'll have something for you here real soon.
Appreciate that. And, I do think I think he came out in support for the post office, the postal service. We appreciate that. That's a big deal. And, it's connected to the census. This region doesn't have good broadband. We don't even have good cell service. So there are a lot of ways where people are not as connected as is assumed. Yeah. So the extension on that census deadline is really critical. So
noted. And with the post office stuff, I doubt that the Senate will take it up, but Tom does anticipate, and I know there was some additional funding in I think both versions, but I know the Senate version for the post office. He might have mentioned this on our last local elected official call, but he does anticipate that there will be, even if that bill does not get through, and obviously we recognize that some of the changes have been concerning. So it's not, we're not saying that those shouldn't be addressed, but there probably will be some extra funding at least in the next phase for the post office.
That's great. Really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Any final questions or thoughts from either staff or on there or committee members or Cornell?
Actually, one quick question. Mark brought up broadband, which I think is really important because that is creating such a divide right now. And there's 2 buckets of funding, the FCC and the USDA, for expanding broadband. And I'm wondering if there's been any conversation and where Tom stands on promoting increasing the funding in those 2 buckets moving forward, so that we can address the particularly the broadband in the most rural areas in this district.
Sure. So he has obviously supported that over the years. I don't remember which phase, but there were some additional broadband funds actually in one of the COVID packages, and I'm not recalling which one right now. The only issue, and we actually have had some FCC awards as well as USDA awards in the district for broadband, Chemung County, Yates County, over in Chautauqua County as well, in the Indian Territory, the Seneca Nation Territory in Irving. The difficulty sometimes with that is, as you know, it's a competitive process, and we can do all we can to advocate for our district, and we do encourage people to apply, but it still is, they're competing with other rural areas, and I think we're supportive of funding that as much as we possibly can, but it is always going to be a competition right now. We don't do earmarks anymore. Some days I really wish we did, because we get some really great requests that we can't fulfill, unfortunately, and our hands are tied sometimes. It's really us advocating. We put the authority, instead of Congress having the authority, we've given it to the executive agency. So it's really us lobbying the executive agency to make sure our district is getting the funds that it needs. And some days that's not where we wish the authority was. I don't know. So we'll continue advocating for the funds. But again, competitive grant process makes it a little tough sometimes to get the money we need. I think we've done pretty well in the last few years. USDA's been done 2 awards in the last 12 months about Irving and Yates County, and they were both at least $10 million, which, doesn't go everywhere it needs to go, but it's a start, it's a help. So we're going to keep fighting for that. Absolutely. We hear you loud and clear. I can tell you where my dad lives. He doesn't have it. It's a pain.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if there's any kind of funding opportunity that's beyond EFSA and USDA. You're just a judge that I got. It's similar to others that others have gotten. Colleague, I had a message from my finance director today. She lives off of Comfort Road with a special needs high school kid. He is in a program that has class 3. She's freaked out. She asked me to reach out. This is a quote from her. I reached out to Spectrum again. I have no option for my rural area. Do I risk the lives of my family and coworkers by sending my son to high school, which is located in a college? It's like really these sad stories, particularly of people with special needs. And there's a higher percentage we're finding in the rural areas. I don't know if that can be a particular note for special needs people with respect to broadband and transportation. So I just wanted to share that in particular.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say this, I'm not going to tell you we love Spectrum because there are many issues with Spectrum, but if you have somebody that's living on a road that's like the last mile and you know that they're considering expanding to that area, we can always reach out to Spectrum and just see where they're at as well. Sometimes it's a huge expense and we don't want to put that on the people that are going to utilize it, but sometimes there's a possibility that they're going there soon. So don't hesitate to reach out to us. If we can put in a word with Spectrum, I can tell you sometimes it's, they're telling us they might be there in a few years. Sometimes it's like, that's actually one of our next projects. But it doesn't hurt to ask also. And
okay.
Some of the smaller companies are also doing a pretty good job expanding into some of these areas. Spectrum obviously has kind of the larger presence, but there are some smaller companies that are doing some great work and trying to expand too. And I know New York State has done some broadband funding to help some of those smaller companies. And I think, is it Hayful? How do you pronounce that? Out Your Way that they're doing?
Hayful.
Yeah. I know that they're trying to expand too. So don't hesitate to ask us if there's a road that you think might be on their list somewhere or near other broadband services where maybe they could expand.
That's a great suggestion. Thank you very much. Okay.
What was the name of the road, Anna?
Comfort Road.
That's in Danby, right? Or
do you know if they have any broadband services anywhere nearby?
They do up the 96B, but Danby is pretty bad with broadband.
Yeah.
Entire municipality. And Comfort Road, it's a really well-known road in our county. But yeah, it hasn't been served as far as I know. I don't know if it's on their agenda. So it would be
okay. It's worth checking in. Yeah, absolutely. And I do know Danby is obviously I love our district, but this is one of the huge challenges that we have. We have a beautiful nature, but it's also a very long stretch between some homes too. And, trying to figure that out.
Yeah, this is the new rural electrification,
Yes.
just taken on by the federal government during the Depression. And that's what has to happen now. It's too obvious that so many people are left out, and now it's not just, can you stream a movie? It's can your kid go to school? Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much, Allison, for your time. And really great to get to know you through these calls. And so,
well, I will be in touch because I'm sure we'll be having another local elected official Zoom for all of you as well. So stay tuned for that.
Great.
Hopefully we'll have information soon.
Thanks so much and have a great day. All right. We have one piece of actual business to vote on. We've got the minutes of August 5th. And I want to give a big thanks to Katrina McCloy, who's been taking copious notes. And, I see these minutes as kind of a record that really kind of helps, to go back and say, hey, what did they say about that? So we really appreciate Katrina taking such detailed notes. Henry, is that your hand up to vote for the minutes? Can't hear you. Is that a yes? Yes. Henry moves the minutes. Deborah seconds the minutes. Are there any comments or corrections? All right, we'll take a vote. Henry,
Yes.
Mike Lane,
Yes.
Deborah Dawson,
Yes.
Anna Kellis.
Yes.
Okay, I'm a yes. Kathy, so that passes. Did we hear at all from Mike Sigler about this meeting or Ann Corman?
I had gotten an email from him during the meeting and he had gotten tied up at work, so.
Okay, all right, I didn't mean Ann Corman. Shauna is our other member, and so we know.
Well, Sean is still out of town.
Right, okay. All right, is there anything else for the good of the order?
Stop recording.
You've been listening, if you're actually there, you've been listening. Welcome, it's good to have you on the call too. All right, if there's nothing else, thank you, everybody. Let's consider this meeting adjourned. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you. Stop. Yes. And straight. Okay, go back to Zoom. Go back to Zoom. Up there, end meeting.